Hello and welcome to Starbound's second channel. My name is Gabriel the Bibi Capaldi and I'll be your narrator today. But before we get into today's story, please do check down below that you are subscribed to the channel. It's 100% free and helps us pop up on your feed a bit more often. Captain Briex's crest feathers lowered involuntarily as another system failure alert chimed through the command center of the Dawn Feather. The bird-like commander steadied himself against the navigation console, his hollow bones feeling unusually heavy under the weight of responsibility. His green plumage, once vibrant and proud, now appeared dull under the blinking red emergency lights that bathed the bridge in an ominous glow.
"Life support at 23%, Captain,"
Science Officer Narilla reported, her darker green feathers with yellow accents barely visible in the dimmed lighting. Her specialized ocular implants glinted as she scanned the readouts, the mechanical additions somehow enhancing rather than detracting from her avian features.
"Estimated survival time 1 day."
Briex ran a 5-fingered hand over the physical controls of his command station, taking comfort in the tactical sensation of switches and dials beneath his feathered digits. The Hexarians had always preferred mechanical interfaces, not from technological limitations, but from deep cultural belief that a warrior must feel their vessel as an extension of their own body. Now, that vessel was dying around them.
"And the fleet?"
he asked, though he already knew the answer. Narilla's sharp amber eyes met his.
"We are the fleet now, Captain."
The Dawn Feather drifted through the debris field that had once been their defense squadron. The Trixar pirates had descended without warning, their scavenged vessels overwhelming the Hexarian ships through sheer numbers. Now, only their single military vessel remained, damaged almost beyond repair, carrying the last survivors of what should have been a routine patrol mission. In the corner of the bridge, Elder Krell performed the ritual mourning gestures, his faded green plumage quivering with each precise movement of his wings. The ceremonial jewelry adorning his neck vibrated softly, providing a rhythmic counterpoint to the chaotic emergency alerts. Beside him, Ilith watched the view screen with the intensity only a maternal guardian who had lost her egg could muster. Her olive-green feathers puffed defensively despite there being no immediate threat to ward off.
"All escape pods accounted for,"
Communications Officer Thrill reported, his voice steady despite the emergency.
"Civilian pods broadcasting on emergency channels. However,"
his voice faltered,
"pursuit trajectories suggest the Trixar vessels will intercept the first wave within 16 hours.
Captain Briex suppressed the urge to raise his golden crest feathers in alarm. Such a display of emotion would not serve his crew now. Instead, he forced his feathers to lie flat against his skull, a posture of determined calm among his species.
"Keep scanning for potential sheltering bodies," he ordered. "A nebula, an asteroid field, anything that might conceal—" "Captain!"
Narilla interrupted, her usually skeptical demeanor broken by genuine surprise.
"I'm detecting an unknown gravity signature. Something massive. Trixar reinforcements?"
Briex asked, his calm posture betrayed by the slight rise of his crest.
"Negative,"
Narilla replied, adjusting her ocular implants.
"Configuration unknown, but the sheer size."
She paused, rechecking her readings.
"It exceeds anything in our database."
Briex moved to her station, his 5-foot frame moving with the natural grace of his avian heritage. Despite their desperate situation, he found himself momentarily distracted by the familiar scent of Narilla's malting oils, a reminder of the seasonal changes their bodies followed regardless of the chaos around them.
"Show me,"
he ordered, pushing aside the inappropriate thoughts. The main view screen shifted to display a section of seemingly empty space. Then, without warning, a massive shape began to materialize, as if the very fabric of space was giving birth to a leviathan.
"Cloaking technology,"
Elder Krell whispered, abandoning his morning ritual to approach the screen.
"No,"
Narilla replied, her voice hushed with awe.
"They were folded somehow, as if they arrived from between dimensions.
The vessel that appeared dwarfed the Dawnfeather so completely that Briex's mind initially struggled to process its scale. His species had evolved from flocking birds that nested in the great arboreal regions of Hazar Prime, where perspective and distance judgment were crucial survival skills. Yet even with his enhanced depth perception, he found it difficult to comprehend the behemoth now filling their view screen.
"Tactical analysis,"
he managed to say, though his voice emerged as little more than a squawk.
"Hull composition unknown,"
Narilla reported.
"Power readings suggest... Captain, their energy reserves exceed our entire planetary defense grid. I'm detecting multiple weapon emplacements, but they remain inactive. They're scanning us, but the signals are gentle, non-invasive."
Before Briex could respond, the communications console chimed with an incoming transmission. Officer Thrill looked up in surprise.
"Captain, they're hailing us. The language protocol matches intercepted broadcasts we've captured from the species known as humans."
A collective gasp rippled through the bridge. Humans were known to the Hexarians only through intercepted entertainment transmissions and sparse data packages. A spacefaring race from a distant sector, rumored to be expanding their territory, but otherwise shrouded in mystery.
"On screen,"
Briex ordered, squaring his shoulders and raising his head to display the dignified bearing expected of a Hexarian military commander. The view screen shifted to reveal a face that sent involuntary shivers through Briex's hollow bones. Mammalian, hairless except for the top of the head and portions of the face, with flat features and rounded eyes lacking the sharp acuity of Hexarian vision. Despite the alien appearance, there was something undeniably commanding in the being's posture. "This is Captain Smith of the United Earth Federation vessel Horizon," the human spoke, the translation software converting the sounds into comprehensible Hexarian. "We've detected your distress signal and stand ready to render assistance." Captain Briex's crest feathers rose in a combination of alarm and suspicion before he could control the instinctual response. He quickly pressed them flat again, hoping the human hadn't noticed or understood the display of vulnerability.
"I am Captain Briex of the Hexarian scout vessel Dawnfeather," he responded formally. "We appreciate your offer of assistance, Captain Smith."
The words felt strange in his beak, pride warring with desperation. The human's face remained impassive, though something like understanding flickered in those alien eyes. "Your vessel appears severely damaged. We have medical facilities and repair capabilities if you wish to dock with the Horizon." Briex turned away from the screen, gesturing for the transmission to be muted temporarily. His officers gathered around him in a tight circle, an instinctual formation that harkened back to their species' flocking behavior.
"We cannot trust unknown allies,"
Narilla hissed softly, her scientific skepticism on full display.
"especially ones with such overwhelming technological superiority. And yet we cannot survive without assistance,"
Elder Krell countered, his age-weathered voice carrying the weight of wisdom.
"I have studied the human transmissions we've intercepted. They are not monsters, though their social structures are—"
He searched for the word.
"chaotic. They change mates as often as they change clothing, and their hierarchies seem fluid rather than proper." "What choice do we have?"
Illith interjected.
"The civilians in the escape pods will not survive Trixar interception. Our life support is failing. We must think of the collective's survival."
Briex closed his eyes briefly, the weight of command pressing down on him like the gravity of a world far larger than his own. In his mind's eye, he saw the elaborate mating dance he had performed for his mate just one season prior. Narilla. Would they ever see their nest again? Would their unhatched egg ever know their parents? Or would they be raised by the elders like he was?
"Life support status," he asked quietly. 21% and falling," Narilla replied. Critical levels in 7 hours, 42 minutes.
Briex turned back to the screen and nodded for the communication to be resumed.
Captain Smith, the Dawn Feather accepts your offer of assistance. Our systems are critical, and we have wounded aboard.
The human's expression remained calm, but something like satisfaction showed in the slight upward curl of the lips. Excellent. We'll guide you in. Transmitting docking protocols now. As the communication ended, Briex turned to his crew.
Prepare for docking procedures. All personnel to maintain discipline and dignity. Remember, we represent the Hexarian people. We must be respectable to our helpers.
The bridge crew returned to their stations, a new energy infusing their movements despite their exhaustion. Only Narilla lingered by Briex's side.
Captain,
she said quietly, maintaining professional restraint.
According to these readings, the human vessel it's over 3 kilometers in length.
Briex felt his crest feathers rise involuntarily once more.
Impossible. Confirmed by multiple sensor arrays,
Narilla insisted.
And Captain, I don't believe this is even one of their largest vessels, based on references in their communications.
A chill ran through Briex's hollow bones. What kind of civilization built ships the size of small moons? What resources must they command? What wars must they fight to require such overwhelming force? As the Dawn Feather limped toward the massive human vessel, Briex performed the traditional trustful ritual, pressing his feathers completely flat against his body in formal submission to fate. The gesture was typically reserved for the most sacred of ceremonies, but it felt appropriate now. They were quite literally falling into the trust of an unknown species. The approach revealed more details of the human vessel that only heightened Briex's awe. What had appeared as a featureless hull from a distance now revealed itself to be a complex landscape of structures, antennas, weapon emplacements, and hangar bays. The horizon was not merely a vessel, it was a mobile city, a fortress that traveled between stars.
Receiving automated docking guidance,
the helmsman reported, his voice tight with tension.
Their artificial gravity is guiding us. I've never felt such precision.
Through the forward viewport, the designated docking bay loomed larger and larger, a cavernous mouth in the side of the Leviathan. Briex realized with a start that the bay alone could house the entire Hexarian defense fleet, had it still existed.
All personnel prepare for docking,
he announced shipwide, his voice steady despite the tremor he felt in his chest.
We are about to make first contact with the humans. May the great Sky Mother watch over us all.
As the Dawn Feather crossed the threshold into the horizon's docking bay, Briex felt as though they were being swallowed by a predator beyond imagining. Yet the gentle guidance of the gravitational beams, the methodical approach of the docking procedures, suggested not a predator consuming prey, but perhaps a parent sheltering a child. The thought was both comforting and terrifying. The Dawn Feather settled onto the docking platform with a gentleness that belied the damage to its landing systems. Inside the docking bay of the horizon, Briex felt disoriented by the sheer scale of the chamber. It wasn't just large, it was cavernous, with multiple vessels of various designs secured in designated berths. Repair drones hovered around some of them, their mechanical arms moving with uncanny accuracy.
Is this their entire fleet?
Elder Krell whispered, his weathered feathers trembling slightly as he peered through a viewport.
No,
Narilla replied, the data scrolling across her ocular implants.
According to their transmitted schematics, this is a secondary docking bay, one of 17 aboard this vessel.
A collective murmur of disbelief rippled through the gathered crew. 17 docking bays of this size on a single ship was beyond comprehension for the Hexarians, whose largest space stations could barely accommodate such extravagance.
Receiving atmospheric composition data,
the environmental officer reported.
They're adjusting their bay to match our requirements. temperature rising to our preferred 30 degrees Celsius.
Briex felt a flutter of appreciation at the consideration. The humans were not just offering aid, they were accommodating the Hexarians' biological needs. It was a level of hospitality he hadn't expected from aliens known primarily through old entertainment broadcasts.
"Prepare the delegation," he ordered, turning to face his officers. "Myself, Science Officer Narilla, Elder Krell, and Illith will represent our people. The remaining crew will stay aboard and begin emergency repairs with whatever assistance the humans offer."
As the designated representatives gathered at the main airlock, Briex found himself instinctively extending a wing toward Narilla before catching himself and maintaining professional decorum. Their personal relationship, though known to the crew, was not something to be displayed during such a critical diplomatic moment. Still, he couldn't help but notice the slight ruffling of her feathers in acknowledgment of his aborted gesture.
"Remember,"
Elder Krell intoned, his ceremonial jewelry clicking as he adjusted his position,
"humans have different social protocols. They do not recognize crest displays or wing gestures. We must adapt our communication." "And maintain our dignity,"
Illith added, her defensive posture never quite relaxing since the loss of her egg.
"We are not beggars, merely temporarily disadvantaged allies."
Briex appreciated the sentiment, though allies struck him as presumptuous. They were strangers, potential friends at best, and helpless refugees at worst. The airlock cycle began, the hissing of equalizing pressure oddly comforting in its familiarity amid so much strangeness. When the outer door slid open, Briex found himself face to face, or rather, face to chest, with the second tallest being he had ever encountered. The human stood easily a full head and shoulders above him, and Briex had to tilt his head upward to meet the alien's gaze. The human had dark skin and close-cropped hair, wearing a uniform that seemed to emphasize function over ornamentation. "Lieutenant Marcos," the human introduced himself with a slight bow. "Welcome aboard the Horizon. I've been assigned as your liaison during your stay with us." His translator rendered his words into perfect Hexarian, though Briex could detect the original sounds beneath the translation, flat and without the musical trills of his own language.
"Captain Briex of the Dawn Feather,"
he responded, performing the abbreviated wing-spread greeting appropriate for first meetings.
"This is Science Officer Narilla, Elder Krell, and Clutch Protector Illith."
Each Hexarian acknowledged the introduction with their own wing gestures, though Briex noted the confusion that briefly crossed the human's face. "Please forgive our lack of familiarity with your greeting customs," Lieutenant Marcos said with what appeared to be a genuine expression of regret. "We've had limited contact with your species."
"As we have with yours,"
Elder Krell interjected, his aged voice carrying unexpected strength.
"Your assistance is appreciated, Lieutenant Marcos."
The human's lips curved upwards slightly, a smile, Briex recalled from their studies of intercepted broadcasts, a sign of pleasure or amusement. Though without the natural display of feathers, it seemed strange to Hexarian sensibilities. "Captain Smith sends his regards and will meet with you officially once you've had time to settle in. In the meantime, I'll show you to your accommodations and introduce you to our chief engineer, who is already preparing to assist with repairs to your vessel." Lieutenant Marcos gestured toward an internal doorway, and as the Hexarian delegation followed, Briex felt the subtle difference in artificial gravity, slightly stronger than they were accustomed to. His hollow bones protested mildly, but the discomfort was manageable. The corridors they traversed were enormous by Hexarian standards, with ceilings that soared at least 3 meters high. The design aesthetic was utilitarian yet sophisticated, curved metal bulkheads with integrated lighting that created no harsh shadows, occasionally viewing ports that revealed the vastness of space, and subtle color coding that presumably designated different sections of the massive vessel. "Our medical team is standing by if any of your people require attention," Marcos explained as they walked. Dr. Henry has studied what limited xenobiological data we have on your species, and has prepared accordingly.
Most of our wounded were evacuated on the civilian pods, Briex explained,
his professional tone masking the grief of remembering those who hadn't survived to be evacuated.
Our immediate concern is our vessel's life support systems.
Understood. The chief engineer is eager to meet you. He's... Marcos seemed to search for the right word. Enthusiastic about new technological challenges. They entered a turbolift, a vertical transport tube that Briex recognized from their own technology, though the human version moved with such smoothness that he barely felt the acceleration as they traversed what must have been dozens of decks. When the doors opened, they stepped directly into what was clearly an engineering command center. A smaller human with brown skin and hair, pulled back into a tight arrangement, stood surrounded by floating holographic displays, his hands moving through the projections. He turned at their arrival, his face lighting up with an expression of unmistakable excitement. "The Haraxians! Welcome, welcome!" He approached quickly, then stopped himself, seeming to remember protocols. "I'm Chief Engineer Javier. I've already sent a preliminary assessment team to your vessel. Hope that's all right. Initial readings suggest we can have your life support stabilized within 3 days, and full repairs completed in approximately 2 Earth weeks." Briex exchanged glances with Narilla, whose ocular implants were rapidly scanning the engineering bay with obvious fascination.
2 Earth weeks?
He repeated, certain there must be a translation error.
Our damage assessments indicated repairs would take a minimum half-year with our facilities.
Javier waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, we have fabrication capabilities on board that can replicate most of your components. The only real challenge is interfacing our systems temporarily with yours. I'm particularly interested in your control mechanisms. All those physical buttons and switches. It's absolutely fascinating from an engineer's perspective. Was that a deliberate design choice?" The rapid-fire delivery left Briex momentarily speechless, but Narilla stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming her initial suspicion.
"Yes, it's cultural rather than technological," she explained. "We believe a warrior must feel their vessel through direct physical interaction, like wings. Digital interfaces create distance."
She extended her feathered fingers to demonstrate.
"Our nerve endings are particularly sensitive. Touch is important to us."
Javier nodded vigorously. "Brilliant! Absolutely brilliant! I personally love buttons. Those virtual reality interface and brain implants are stupid. I'd love to discuss it further when there's time." He gestured to a display on the wall. "Here's the repair schedule I've drafted. We'll need approval before proceeding with any modifications, of course." The display showed a detailed schematic of the Dawn Feather, with damaged sections highlighted and repair sequences animated in a time projection. Briex stared at the display, amazed not just by the technology, but by the completeness of the scan. The humans had mapped every conduit, every system of their vessel within minutes.
"This is very thorough," he said carefully.
"Standard procedure," Lieutenant Marcos assured him. "We maintain all data regarding your vessel as confidential under Federation protocols. The scans are necessary for efficient repairs." Before Briex could respond, Javier continued enthusiastically. "I've assigned Team Alpha to your life support systems as the priority. Teams Beta and Gamma will focus on structural integrity and propulsion, respectively. Each team has a specialized fabrication unit to produce replacement components."
"How many personnel are involved in these repairs?"
Elder Krell inquired, his aged eyes narrowing slightly. 36 engineers and technicians, supported by 62 automated systems, Javier replied without hesitation. "Standard deployment for a vessel of your size." Briex felt his crest feathers rising again in surprise. The entire crew of the Dawn Feather was 17 individuals. The humans were assigning more than twice that number just for repairs, and treating it as routine. "Perhaps we should continue to your accommodations," Lieutenant Marcos suggested, noting the Hexarians' apparent overwhelm. "You can rest and refresh yourselves while the initial repairs are underway." As they followed Marcos back to the turbolift, Illith moved closer to Briex.
"Their resources," she whispered. "They expend them so casually."
Briex could only nod in agreement. The Hexarian approach to resources was one of careful conservation, each item valued and used to its fullest before replacement. The human approach seemed almost wasteful by comparison, yet he couldn't deny its apparent effectiveness. The turbolift carried them to what Marcos described as the guest quarters section of the vessel. When the doors opened, they revealed a corridor with individual doorways spaced at regular intervals. "We've prepared individual accommodations for each of you," Marcos explained, leading them forward. "You can adjust the environmental controls to your physiological or personal preference."
"Individual accommodations?"
Elder Krell repeated, his confusion evident.
"For all of us?"
Marcos nodded. "Yes, every crew member and passenger aboard the Horizon has private quarters." The concept was so foreign that, for a moment, the Hexarians simply stared at the human. In their culture, only the highest-ranking officials might have private sleeping quarters, and even then, most preferred the comfort of communal spaces that reflected their evolutionary history as flock creatures. "Is something wrong?" Marcos asked, noting their reaction.
No,
Briex hastened to assure him.
"It's just different from our customs. We typically share living spaces."
"Ah, I see." Marcos seemed to consider this information. "We can certainly rearrange if you prefer communal quarters. The rooms are connected by internal doors that can be left open."
"That's unnecessary,"
Elder Krell nodded, his ceremonial jewelry clicking with the movement.
"Though your consideration is appreciated."
Marcos guided them to the first room, and as the door slid open, Briex couldn't surpass a small chirp of surprise. The chamber was spacious, with furnishings that could accommodate avian physiology. Environmental controls were prominently displayed, along with what appeared to be a food preparation station and private washing facilities.
"This is for a single individual?"
Narilla asked, her ocular implants scanning the room rapidly. "Standard guest quarters," Marcos confirmed. "Is it inadequate?"
"Quite the opposite,"
Briex replied, stepping into the room and feeling the perfect temperature embrace his feathered form.
"On our vessel, this would be the captain's quarters, and considered luxurious at that."
Marcos seemed pleased by this. "The connecting doors can be left open between the rooms to create a communal space. If you need anything else, the communication panel by the entrance will connect you directly to me. After you've had time to rest, I'll return to escort you to a formal reception with Captain Smith." As the human departed, the 4 Hexarians moved through the interconnected rooms, opening all the doors as suggested to create a space that better suited their communal instincts. Once alone, they gathered in the central area, their professional facades giving way to expressions of undisguised awe.
"Their casual abundance,"
Elder Krell said softly, settling his aged frame onto one of the nest-like depressions.
"It's beyond anything in our records. The others who remained on the ship won't believe this. Their culture is different from ours,"
Narilla added, her scientific detachment failing to mask her excitement.
"Those holographic interfaces in engineering, responsive to the smallest gesture, yet capable of displaying complex data in 3 dimensions. And their size,"
Illith noted, her defensive posture finally relaxing slightly in the safety of private company.
"I felt like a nestling again, looking up at beings so tall."
Briex moved to a viewing port that dominated one wall of the chamber, staring out at the starscape beyond. From this angle, he could see part of the Horizon's hull stretching away into the distance, weapon emplacements and sensor arrays dotting its surface like the technological equivalent of a forest canopy.
"We must be careful,"
he said finally, turning back to face his companions.
We know nothing about their politics, their true intentions. This ship, its size, its capabilities, it wasn't built for peaceful exploration alone. They offer help without demands," Elder Krell added. "What if they say we are in debt later?" "They aren't doing it now." Narilla moved to stand beside Briex, close enough that their feathers brushed lightly. The contact, brief as it was, provided comfort amid the alien surroundings. "But we should remain cautious. We are but one small vessel. What would happen if we represented something they desired or feared?"
Briex had no answer for that. As the others continued their discussion, he turned back to the viewport, watching the distant stars. Somewhere out there, the civilian escape pods carried the remaining Hexarians of their expedition, and somewhere beyond that, their homeworld continued its existence, unaware of the immense power they had just encountered. For better or worse, the Dawn Feathers distress call had introduced the Hexarian people to a civilization whose capabilities dwarfed their own as thoroughly as the Horizon dwarfed their vessel. And Briex couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter would change everything for his species. As if summoned by his thoughts, a soft chime sounded from the communication panel, and Lieutenant Marcos's voice filled the chamber. "Captain Briex, Engineer Patel reports that life support restoration on your vessel is proceeding ahead of schedule. He also requests permission to study your manual control interfaces more closely, as he finds them absolutely fantastic. You can deny it if you want. He is just an obsessed nerd." Despite himself, Briex felt his beak curve in the Hexarian equivalent of a smile. Perhaps there was hope for understanding between their species after all.
"Permission granted," he replied. "And please convey our gratitude for the swift assistance."
As the communication ended, Briex caught Narilla watching him, her head tilted in the gesture that, between mates, could indicate concern and affection.
"We will survive," she said softly. "As our species always has."
Briex nodded, his crest feathers relaxing slightly.
"Yes," he agreed. "But I wonder if the humans have any idea how much this means to us."
Lieutenant Marcos returned precisely 2 hours later, giving the Hexarians just enough time to rest, but not enough to grow anxious. Briex had used the time to compile a status report on the Dawn Feather and organize his thoughts about the unprecedented situation they found themselves in. His crest feathers had finally settled into a neutral position, though they still moved occasionally when he contemplated the scale of the human vessel surrounding them. "Captain Smith is ready to receive you on the bridge," Marcos announced, after they had acknowledged his entry chime. "Your vessel's life support has been restored to 60% capacity, and the civilian escape pods have been located. The Horizon has dispatched 2 scout vessels to assist them." Briex exchanged a quick glance with Narilla, whose ocular implants flickered as she processed this information.
"Are the pods safe? No Trixar interceptions?"
"Safe. No Trixar presence yet," Marcos replied with reassuring confidence. "Our scouts will reach them well before any potential interceptors. Captain Smith will brief you on the details. He will meet you on the bridge." The bridge of the Horizon was a cavernous chamber with a domed ceiling displaying an enhanced tactical projection of nearby space. The command center was made of many individual alcoves, with specialized stations positioned at regular intervals, all facing a central raised platform where a huge orb showed a complex diagram of the ship. Captain Smith stood waiting for them in one of the alcoves. Smith was the tallest human Briex had yet encountered, with silver hair and a bearing that spoke of decades of command experience. A ceremonial sidearm hung at his hip, and in one hand he carried a small container that emitted a rich, bitter aroma. "Captain Briex," Smith's voice was deep, each word carefully measured. "Welcome to the Horizon. I'll keep this brief as we have a situation developing. The Trixar fleet that attacked your people is approaching our position. 12 vessels in attack formation. Briex felt his feathers tighten against his body in alarm.
Captain, the Trixar never commit such numbers unless
they're determined to reclaim what they consider their rightful prey, Smith finished, surprising the Hexarians with his understanding. Yes, we've encountered their kind before. Before Briex could suggest evasive action, a soft alert chimed from the main bridge, and Smith turned his attention to a young human at the tactical station. Report, Weapons Officer Kowalski.
Trixar fleet emerging from hyperspace, sir, the enthusiastic young officer replied. 12 vessels in attack formation, weapons charging.
They're hailing us. Smith gestured for the Hexarian delegation to remain where they were. On screen, Kowalski. The massive tactical display shifted to reveal the face of a Trixar, a reptilian creature with bony ridges along its skull and prominent fangs protruding from its lower jaw. It wore what appeared to be trophies from previous conquests attached to its scaled armor.
"This is Warlord Grax of the Trixar hunting fleet."
The creature's guttural voice emerged through a translator device.
"You are harboring our rightful prey. Return the Hexarian vessels immediately, or face the consequences of violating the sacred hunting rights of the Trixar Dominion."
Smith sipped calmly from his container before responding, a gesture so incongruous with the threat that Briex found himself momentarily fascinated by the human's composure. "Warlord Grax, I am Captain Smith of the United Earth Federation vessel Horizon. The Hexarians are under our protection. They are not your prey, and we recognize no hunting rights over sentient species." The Trixar's ridges flared in clear agitation.
"Your species is new to this sector, human. You do not yet understand the established order. All lesser races acknowledge the Trixar right of conquest. Either you do that, or we start firing."
Smith placed his container on a small surface extending from his command chair. "I suggest you withdraw your vessels."
"This is your final warning,"
Grax snarled.
"Surrender our prey, or we will destroy your vessel and claim both species as trophies."
Smith's expression remained impassive. "Officer Kowalski, destroy one of their ships." The young human's fingers reached for the control interface, his enthusiasm barely contained. "Targeting solution ready, Captain. Automated systems recommend full autonomous firing." "No," Smith replied. "Manual targeting. Consider this a training exercise, Kowalski." "Yes, sir," the young officer responded with obvious delight, adjusting his controls. "Fire," Smith said calmly, cutting off the Trixar's continued threats with a single word. Through the viewport, Briex watched a single missile depart. When it exploded, space became so bright that even Narilla's enhanced vision couldn't look at it directly. Within seconds, the Trixar fleet had lost one vessel, not destroyed, but obliterated from existence. "Warlord Grax," Smith spoke with the same calm as before, "consider this a formal notice. The Hexarian people are now under United Earth Federation protection. Any further aggressive action against them will be met with a proportionate response." The Trixar warlord's face contorted with rage, but there was also something new in those reptilian eyes. Fear.
This violation will not stand."
"I suggest you use your emergency systems to return to your territory and reconsider your hunting rights policy," Smith replied before terminating the communication. He turned to the Hexarian delegation, who stood in stunned silence at the casual display of overwhelming technological superiority. "I apologize for the interruption," he said, retrieving his container of dark beverage and taking another calm sip. "Now, about those repairs to your vessel." 5 days later, the Dawn Feather prepared for departure. The repairs had been completed in half the time Engineer Javier had initially estimated, and the Hexarian vessel now boasted several minor enhancements that the humans had insisted were standard upgrades for Allied vessels. Briek stood in the docking bay with Narilla at his side, watching as the last of their crew boarded. The civilian pods had been recovered and their occupants temporarily housed aboard the Horizon in what one of them had described as the most luxurious resting resort imaginable. Captain Briex, Lieutenant Marcos approached, carrying a small data device. "Final diagnostics for your vessel. All systems are functioning at optimal capacity, with the shield harmonics improved by 38% and propulsion efficiency increased by 22%.
"Thank you, Lieutenant," Briex replied, accepting the device. "Your hospitality has been illuminating."
Marcos smiled. "It's been our pleasure. Captain Smith sends his regards and hopes for continued positive relations between our peoples." As the lieutenant departed, Narilla leaned closer, her feathers brushing against Briex's in a gesture intimate enough to be noticed, but still within the bounds of public propriety.
"The civilians are already discussing alliance possibilities," she murmured. "Elder Krell overheard them talking about petitioning the great matriarch directly upon our return."
Briex nodded slightly.
"I've heard. And what do you think, Science Officer?"
Narilla's ocular implants flickered briefly.
"Objectively, an alliance with humans offers significant advantages. Their technology, their resources."
She hesitated.
"But there are cultural considerations. The speed with which they decide to use violence, their casual approach to matters we consider formal."
"All valid points," Briex agreed, maintaining the neutral tone expected of him in public.
"I will present all perspectives to the matriarch without bias."
Narilla tilted her head in the gesture that only he would recognize as affectionate skepticism.
"Of course you will, Captain."
As they boarded the Dawnfeather, Briex overheard a group of civilians chattering excitedly about their experience.
"Did you see the recreational facilities?" one was saying. "Individual bathing chambers with temperature controls for each occupant." "The food dispensers," another added. "Programmed with Hexarian nutritional requirements, but with flavor variations we've never experienced. If we're honest,"
a third lowered their voice to what they thought was a discreet volume,
"I think there will be a lot of off-season eggs laid after this experience. The comfort levels alone have triggered molting cycles in half the civilian contingent."
Briex suppressed the urge to chuckle, though he couldn't help but notice that Narilla's own feathers had taken on the particular luster that preceded the mating season. Perhaps there was truth to the observation. From the command center of the Dawnfeather, Briex oversaw the final departure procedures. The vessel responded with a crispness that hadn't been present before the human modifications, controls still pleasingly tactile, but somehow more responsive beneath his feathered digits.
"Receiving departure clearance from Horizon Control,"
Communications Officer Thrill reported.
"They're opening a departure corridor and providing navigation data for optimal return trajectory to Hexarian space. Acknowledge their clearance with formal gratitude,"
Briex ordered.
"Helmsman, take us out at 1/4 thrust."
As the Dawnfeather glided smoothly from the docking bay of the human battleship, Briex found himself already composing the private message he would deliver to the great matriarch. He would maintain formal neutrality in his official report, of course, but his personal recommendation would be clear. An alliance with humans was not merely advantageous, it was essential for the future of their species. The massive form of the Horizon receded in their viewports, its size still awe-inspiring even after days spent aboard. Briex noticed a small addition to the Dawnfeather's hull displayed on one of the monitor screens, a discreet human insignia, elegantly incorporated into the Hexarian design as if it had always belonged there. He saw it not as a mark of ownership, but of friendship.
"Set course for home,"
settling back in his command chair with a newfound confidence. The universe had suddenly become a much larger place for the Hexarian people, but perhaps also a safer one. As the Dawnfeather's engines powered up to their newly enhanced capacity, and the stars blurred into streams of light, Briex allowed his crest feathers to rise slightly in anticipation. The great matriarch would certainly find this first contact report interesting reading indeed.